state your name.
Ryland Grace. I spoke up from a coma. I'm several light years from my apartment. And I'm not an astronaut. I'm not an astronaut. I'm not an astronaut.
If you don't go, you die.
So sick. So this movie, Project Hail Mary, is coming out next year. So let's explore the science and the aliens behind it. And warning, there's going to be some moderate spoilers. I won't really be talking about the ending or the plot, but you've been warned. Okay, let's dive in. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the channel. My name is Reese. I used to teach tech ethics at MIT, but now I'm teaching this series on how everything evolved. It kind of synthesizes a decade of my research and these 20,000 note cards that I've made on all these subjects. And so recently we've been talking about the origin of life and of space. And so I wanted to use this as an excuse to talk about aliens in pop culture. And one of those is Project Hail Mary, which is this amazing book from Andy Weir from the late 2010s. It's currently being made into a movie now that'll come out next year. And so today I want to look at three cool science subjects. One is Astrophage, which is this cool bacteria alien in the books and movie. Rocky, who's this like alien friend that he meets. And then kind of Andy's thoughts on the Fermi Paradox and why everything in the book needs to be just a few light years away from each other. Okay, so let's start with Astrophage. So here's Andy Weir, the author, talking about the Astrophage on Neil deGrasse Tyson's amazing show, Star Talk.
The main problem that humanity is facing is there's a microbe, an extraterrestrial microbe called Astrophage, or at least that's what humans name it. It's it's about the size of a bacteria. It's about 20 picometers across. And it lives on the surface of stars. And so it's kind of like an algae that lives on stars. And it collects energy through most of its life and then uses that energy, it stores it as mass, and then uses that energy to propel itself to a planet so it can get the elements it needs to reproduce, because there's really nothing to be found on a star except for hydrogen and helium. And then the problem is this is breeding out of control in our star and all the local stars, by the way, and it's causing the sun to dim. And once the sun gets dim enough, the food chain on Earth will collapse and everything will die. So that is the problem that they're facing.
Okay, so the Astrophage is this creature that eats stars. Let's hear Andy talk a little bit more about how it actually works scientifically.
So it's got DNA.
It's got DNA. It's got DNA, RNA transcription, ribosomes, mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cell, and everything else. Now, you asked what I added to it. I also added their cell membrane. This is the complete made-up part of the physics, so I'm sure you'll appreciate it. The Astrophage cell membrane has this method of turning heat energy into, it takes hydrogen ion, aka proton collisions, and turns the energy of those collisions into two neutrinos, balancing the momentum and becoming the energy. And then
the energy for it to live, or the energy for it to propulse?
Propulse. This is how it stores energy. It turns heat energy, in other words, the speed of these hydrogen atoms, it turns that into neutrinos, and it has a magical ability to store neutrinos. And so I say that its cell membrane has a feature, which nobody understands how it's doing it, of super cross-sectionality. It is not possible for anything to quantum tunnel through this.
Wow. And so then it sends the neutrinos out for its own, to recoil from that, and that's its propulsion.
Not quite. It uses the neutrinos to store it. Then when it wants to do propulsion, it forces the neutrinos to collide into each other because they're Majorana particles, so they will self-annihilate because it's an matter-antimatter reaction. And then they will turn into photons that work out to be in the infrared spectrum because of the energy.
So this is where we get into some of the actual science. Okay, so you have this weird astrophage thing, this little creature that's going around, and it goes to these big stars and it starts to eat them. And so what he's saying is that the way that astrophage works is, in addition to having normal DNA and RNA and ribosomes and stuff in mitochondria, it also has a bunch of protons in there, and that when they hit each other, so it takes the heat energy of the protons, turns them into these neutrinos, And neutrinos, as a reminder, are passing through us at the rate of trillions per second. When the sun does its reactions, its hydrogen fusion, as it does that equals mc squared, produces tons of energy, but also produces all of these neutrinos as well. And so those things, but neutrinos are weird because they don't interact with anything. They almost have no mass, and they only interact with a little bit of the weak force. And so they pretty much just move through everything unimpeded, and it's how we understand the center of the earth and stuff is through neutrinos. And then what Andy's saying is that these neutrinos hit each other, and when they hit each other, they produce this little photon that then shoots off in one way, and then it propels the astrophage the other way. So this is roughly the idea behind the astrophage. There's a lot of stuff that's difficult here. Something like this, to live on the sun, would be really hard. It's so hot. The ability to keep these neutrinos inside of itself is crazy, would be really hard. And then finally, the ability to actually, when you want to, just to combine them together to shoot off a photon to then propel yourself through space, that's all really, really difficult. But you can see why they say, 1 gram of this stuff has the energy of a nuclear bomb, because you're turning all these little protons into neutrinos. Neutrinos have a ton of energy, and then it shoots it off. And so you can imagine these things exploding or shooting through space really fast. You can kind of imagine the astrophage as a little mini sun, But the way that the sun actually works when it does the proton-proton chain, which does normal fusion, it's taking these 4 hydrogen particles and then shoving them together. It's kind of using gravity to collapse them so deep in together, turn the 2 of those protons into neutrons. It uses the weak force and says, okay, I guess I'm going to be a neutron now. When it becomes a neutron, it shoots off a neutrino. And then when these things combine together, when the protons and the neutrons combine together, you get this slightly less atom, the helium atom, that has slightly less mass than 4 hydrogen atoms. And so you shoot off all the extra energy, all the extra mass as energy equals mc squared through these gamma rays. So this can only happen in something really big like a sun, because there's so much gravity and energy. And so the astrophage is kind of small. I would be curious to know, it's not actually doing equals mc squared stuff. It's not doing fusion. It's doing heat energy into neutrinos, into photons to power itself. So it's a very cool idea, and would be very surprising if this thing existed in the world. Okay, now let's talk about Rocky, who's this really cool alien kind of spider-like creature. And again, let's listen to Andy Weir now on a different podcast, the Event Horizon podcast. And let's listen to Andy Weir talk about how he came to construct Rocky, which is this really cool thing where he said, let's pretend the planet that Rocky's from first, and then we'll construct Rocky based off of those constraints. And I'm actually going to play this one at 1.5 speed, so it's a little bit faster.
How did you arrive at that biology? And I don't want to give away too much, of course, but what was your thought process going into trying to figure that out?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I had a lot of fun with that, because I started off by saying, okay, he's going to meet an alien. Well, where the alien? I have no idea what the alien looks like or what he acts like or anything like that. So when I start with the basics, let's think about the home world. So I decided that the alien came from the star 40 Eridani. Okay, and I'm like, okay, well, what planet is he from? And there is a known exoplanet in real life called 40 Eridani, I think A or B, something like that. So I said, okay, that real planet that exists is Rocky's homeworld. So what do we know about this? Well, the planet is 8 times Earth's mass. We know that. And we know that its orbit it's very close to its star. Its whole orbit takes only 46 days. So it's whipping around the star, and it's really close to the star. And I'm like, all right, so if a planet was 8 times Earth's mass, I will just arbitrarily say it has about the same density as Earth. We don't know the density of that planet in real life. But I said it'll be about the same density, which ultimately works out to it being, like 2 point something times the diameter, and works out to be about 2 Gs of surface gravity. I'm like, okay, so that's the gravity on the surface. Also, it's really, really, really close to its star, so it's going to be really hot. All right, so I will kind of arbitrarily say, and it would need a thick-ish atmosphere to retain and balance out that heat. And so I'm like, okay, but let me arbitrarily say it's like 210 degrees Celsius on the surface. But I also wanted there to be liquid water on this planet, because for various reasons, we find out that life, as suspected, at least all the life in this book, does require liquid water. So I'm like, water at 210 degrees would boil. Well, it would boil if it's at 1 atmosphere of pressure. But if it's at 29 atmospheres of pressure, the water won't boil. So it's still liquid. So I need an atmosphere thick enough with high enough pressure that the water would still be liquid. Okay, so now I'm starting to learn things about this planet. It's really hot. It's got a really thick atmosphere, and it's got, it's really hot, high atmospheric pressure, and a very fast year. Like, it goes around its star very quickly. Now, in real life, if a planet is really close to a star, the star tends to basically sandblast the planet's atmosphere away. So Mercury has nothing. you need a strong magnetic field to protect your atmosphere. So I said, like, okay, the planet has a really strong magnetic field. That way it can be this close to its star and still have such a thick atmosphere. Okay, well, the only way a planet gets a really strong magnetic field is by having a liquid ferromagnetic core, like Earth does, and to spin around. And the faster it spins, the better its magnetic field. So I said, all right, this planet spins around really, really, really fast. So I decided its entire day length is just 6 Earth hours long. So what's neat is that just each thing leads to the next thing. And then I realized, okay, with an atmosphere that thick, the light isn't going to make it to the ground. So that means the creatures that live on the ground won't have eyes, or there's no light to make use of to evolve eyes with. So, all right, this creature is, what do we know? Okay, well, these creatures are blind. They don't even have eyes. They never evolved, and they have other sensory input. They're very, very strong because they can move around comfortably in 2Gs and so on. So that's kind of like how I developed the aliens from the ground up. Also, I didn't want Star Trek aliens. No.
So that's a really cool answer from Andy. So yeah, Rocky's built on, 40 Eridani, this planet that's really close to its star. So it has big atmosphere. The creature has to be, it can't see. It's this, the spider-like creature, these 5 limbs. It has to be really strong. The other cool thing that he has it consume ammonia as its primary kind of solvent. So humans have H2O as our primary solvent, but you could have NH3 as your primary solvent, especially under these temperature and pressure conditions. And so that's why Rocky, the alien, and Ryland Grace, the astronaut, can't interact with each other, because Ryland can't exist in this super ammonia world. And what is Rocky's body made of? It might be made of some sand, like it has to be really strong. So maybe it's some silicon sand things. Maybe it's some kind of like mollusk shells that are made of calcium carbonate. Maybe it's something like chitin, which is what exoskeletons are made out of, which is essentially cellulose, like what plants are made of, but has some nitrogen in there. And so, yeah, it's kind of unclear. But yeah, I think Rocky is a much more reasonable possible creature than Astrophage. I think one of the least likely things about Rocky is that when I think about which creatures would use NH3 as their solvent, it seems much more likely that they'd use H2O, but we never know. Maybe 1% or, 0.001% of creatures have NH3 as their solvent, which would be kind of cool. And the other note is I think, Andy Weir, he did this because he didn't want the creatures to just be interacting, humans to be interacting with them kind of normal style, Star Trek style. He wanted it to be hard for them to interact, like with this ammonia system. The other big issue with Rocky's homeworld is that this Eridani A was also used for Star Trek and for Spock back in the day. And unfortunately, we've learned that the planet doesn't actually exist. We thought it existed based off the wobble of the stars and whatever, but it's not actually there. And we learned this in 2024. Now, the final weird thing about Project Hail Mary is that Rocky and Astrophage and humans are all very close to each other. We're all in the same galactic neighborhood, maybe 20 light years away from each other. And the reason why Andy did that is that he doesn't want to break the speed of light. And if you don't break the speed of light, everything has to be so near to each other in the Milky Way. Let's hear him talk about this. And he talks about it as panspermia, the idea that life all came from the same initial source in the universe, or rather in our little small Milky Way.
All of the life in this book, the alien life and the Earth life, came from a single panspermia event. So Astrophage, in fact, has mitochondria and ribosomes and everything. So I did that partially to explain why there was life on, so close together. The odds, whatever numbers you want to put into the Drake equation, the odds that life would happen, really, really close and one of the stars within 20 light years seems really slim.
Yeah, so I agree with Andy. The odds that there's life near us is low, and so the only way to get life near us is if it all came from the same place initially, aka these astrophages. Here's Andy talking about the Fermi Paradox again, but on the other podcast.
Got a good chance to have a lot of neighbors.
I don't think we're alone. I think the Drake equation, even if you plug in the stingiest numbers, you still get a whole bunch of potential life. And
in my opinion, it's 1,000 intelligent civilizations in our galaxy, about 1 billion bits of life within our galaxy.
And, individual geneses. So I don't think we're alone. However, my answer to the Fermi Paradox is this. I don't believe it is ever going to be possible to travel faster than light or send information faster than light. I do believe it is a hard limit. So however fun it is to make a setting like Star Trek or Star Wars where you can travel faster than light, and it kind of mimics a nautical theme where individual stars and planets become ports of call and stuff like that, that fits really well in a fictional setting. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I just think that we will never be able to go faster than light. So as a result, there could be an alien species just 500 light years away, and we would still not know about it.
Yeah, I super agree with this. And so we can really see this shown by this image of our galaxy and our kind of local cluster, where we have, here's us, and you can kind of zoom way out, and here's the Milky Way. Boom, here's the big old Milky Way. And remember, the amount that our radio signals will be dispersed around us is it's like 10 to 100 light years. It's a little pebble that's falling out until it turns into the background condition. It's very hard to hear there might be tons of life in all this thing, but it's likely to be at different points in time, at somewhere else in the 10 billion years of the universe. It's also likely to be in somewhere else in space, somewhere else in the 100,000 light years. So what Andy's answer to that is, when he's trying to create this theme for his book, he's saying, look, when you zoom in enough, you have to be here. Here's our little sun in the middle, there's our sun. Here's the Mercury, here's Earth, here's Mars, and you keep on zooming out. You finally get 1 light year away, the Oort cloud. Andy puts most of his book in this small set of stars just around it, Eridani and Tau Ceti and some others. And so we're in this very small little world around us, and because that's the only way that something like this would work in reality. So yeah, I hope this helped you understand how astrophages might work. Pretty unlikely that would be real at all. How Rocky works, which is pretty cool and interesting, especially the planet, how that might work. And then why Andy's answer to the Fermi Paradox is we are not alone, but everything is so far away in space or time that it's impossible to contact them. And so he has everything in the book happen through a panspermia event. I'm excited to see the movie when it comes out next year, and excited to have Ryan Gosling on the podcast soon. Hi, Ryan. Welcome to the show. Thank you, as always, for watching. And thank you to Roots donors for supporting this channel. If you want to understand more about the past and how we got here, check out the previous videos here. And if you want to understand the future and where we're going, feel free to subscribe here. Hope to see you then. Bye.